Now, welcome to the closing keynote, where Cory Zue will talk to us about making income, using coding to make passive income. Take it away.
Cool. Well, it is almost 5 on a Friday, so I appreciate that you all are still here. Uh, you're all getting tired. I would say that I'll try to be quick, although I worry that I'm not going to be, so I won't necessarily promise that. But yeah, so my name is Cory. I'm going to talk today about using coding skills to make passive income. I hope you're not dissuaded. Probably a lot of you got this email announcing the talk, and I opened it and I laughed because like the title sounds like clickbait. I was like, oh, it does sound like clickbait. Hopefully this is the non-clickbait version of this topic. I will leave it to you to decide. So someone asked me this question. Well, I got asked this question a bunch today, and I never really know how to answer it. The kind of most boring answer that I give, that I'm used to giving, is I'm a software developer. But I run my own business. If people know these words, I'll say like I'm a solopreneur or I'm an indie hacker. Probably not everyone knows what that means. If I'm feeling really specific, I'll say I run a portfolio of revenue-generating technology products, which is a bit of a mouthful. If I'm feeling cheeky or clickbaity, I'll say I make apps that make money while I sleep, or kind of whatever I want. How I actually earn a living is through, a portfolio of technology products that are monetized online. And basically that means is I make stuff and I put it on the internet, and then there's some reason why you can pay me or that makes money, either through a one-time payment, through a subscription, through ads, affiliates, whatever it is. I have a bunch of different things that make some varying amounts of money, and I just kind of every day just like work on one of these, support it, build more of them, and so on. Okay, so how I got here. So I started, possibly like many of you, in just sort of like a normal corporate gig. I didn't last very long, and I joined my friend's company called Demagi. When I joined, we were like 3 people, and he was like, "Hey, you want to be CTO?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'll be CTO." And like I basically like LARPed as a CTO, but the company was quite successful. And then before I knew it, I was like the CTO of like a 200-person company, and I had like a 35-person team under me, and it was like I was like supposed to be a real CTO now, and I was, but I also like kind of hated it. I was doing all these meetings and management, and like I hardly ever got to write code, and mostly I burnt out. And so I told my friend, I was like, I need a break. So I decided to take like a 6-month unpaid sabbatical to like figure out my life. On that sabbatical, I discovered this website called Indie Hackers, which basically is a website that told stories of people doing kind of like what I do now, which is essentially just like building these random apps and like making a living off them. I was like, okay, that sounds cool. Maybe I'll like try that. And so I was like, okay, in these 6 months, I'm going to try to earn like $1 doing this like indie hacker thing. So the first thing I did that succeeded was incredibly silly, and I'm still like kind of embarrassed to talk about it, but it was basically an app that lets you make like these little like cards that uh, you find at weddings and like certain types of events. And basically, like you upload a spreadsheet of your guests to this website, you download a PDF, you pay me like 100 rands, and I was surprised that that actually worked, and I made my first dollar, and I was like completely addicted. It was like this most incredible feeling. And so then I tried to do that over and over again, and then eventually I was like, oh, I bet other people want to do this over and over again. And so I got kind of meta and built this product to like help other people do this essentially. And so it's a Django, basically like a configurable Django code base that I now sell. And this is how I make probably like 80% of my money now, or maybe even more. Um, Pegasus, just really quickly, is like I get kind of blown away by like how many people have built like really cool products and like really successful businesses on top of Pegasus code, including like Y Combinator companies, and like also just like random person's like hobby project that he's just like doing with his friends. But it has about like over 1,000 people using it. Probably like hundreds and hundreds of apps have been built with it, which is pretty fun. And I wrote about this whole journey I wrote like in way too much detail from like day one of like, I'm going to try this out on my website. So if you want like a very, very long version of the story, you can like click around there and find out. Um, Key attributes of this path, just to kind of clarify what we're talking about. So I'm talking about products. So like the key thing is you're not trading your time for money. This is like something that someone just like buys and you get paid without having to like do an hour of work for that. I'm talking about monetized stuff. Passion projects are great. I love passion projects. I have them. That's just not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about bootstrapped, which basically means you're not trying to raise money. You are trying to earn enough from your own profits, and you never have to raise money, and you just kind of take the profits in yourself. And it's like a calm path. Like the goal is not to like grow a 100-person company. I mean, you could, but my goal was never to grow a 100-person company. It was just to have this kind of like calm, not stressful life where I have a lot of freedom. And a relatively mainstream term for this, how many people, just curious, how many people in this room have heard of indie hacking or indie hackers? Okay, so it's like getting more mainstream, but still not that mainstream. So my goals for this talk, I have two. The first is just to kind of convince you that this is a possible career path that you can consider. I think a lot of people don't think of this as a career path, but it is. And then if you decide that maybe you want to give it a shot, hopefully give you some tips that help with your chances of success. And this is like my diagram for how this works. And it's not very complicated, but the first thing you have to do is you have to create space in your life. And for a lot of people, I think this is probably the hardest part, is just sort of finding the space to pursue something like this. So I'll talk about that a fair amount. Then you enter this iteration cycle, and there you're basically like taking a shot at something. And then if it doesn't work out, you like apply the lessons learned, take a shot at something else. That doesn't mean like necessarily build a new product, but like, try a different approach to marketing, try a different way of presenting the UX, whatever it is. Hopefully, eventually something works, and then you come out the other side and you profit. So let's talk about making space first. And I'll pose this question like, so what do you need to get started with this? And it's a big room, so I'll just answer it for you, which is like kind of nothing. Almost, you need time, basically. And you need a particular type of time where you can do like deep focused work on a consistent basis. And that is not always easy to find. So how do you make time? I think the most common path is to like fit it into your nights and weekends. So this is my friend Wasani, who created an app called Boardroom, which is like, it's like Tinder for LinkedIn. And it's he's growing it. It's pretty popular in South Africa, and he's got like 10 other projects, and he's done all this while working a full-time job at Allen Gray, and I think like also getting an MBA. Doing this in nights and weekends is definitely like the least disruptive way to pursue this, but it's really hard. And like for me, like I have kids, like I'm always tired at the end of a long day of work. Like this just wasn't an option. So what if you can't pull this off? One option is to just kind of like YOLO it, and then you like quit your job, and you're like, cool, I'm gonna quit my job, and I've got like 6 months of savings in my bank account, and I'm just gonna like make this work. I think this is usually not a great plan. It's just like it puts so much time pressure and financial pressure on you to succeed that like, and there's just like, it's not a process that you can control. So it's not like if you just like work your butt off for 6 months that you're guaranteed to succeed in like ways that some jobs are more like that. Like there's just so much variance. So I don't necessarily recommend this. What I did and the path that I recommend is more of just like a patient thing where basically you try to integrate this quest into your regular life in like a slower and more sustainable way. So typically that, like for me, that meant working less, and that either means probably earning less, like you ask your boss if you can have Fridays off and get paid 80% as much, or getting paid more. Maybe you like switch to contracting or switch to freelancing. Then you build some products, and then basically like whenever those products start earning, then you can sort of like readjust the hours until it works. And so this is my actual income for sort of like my first 7 years on this journey. So you can see like in 2016, I was a full-time employee. In 2017, I went on sabbatical and started doing this thing, and I dropped down to half-time at my job and filled most of my income with consulting. Just like I tapped my network. I'm like, I'm available. I'm going to charge a lot. Some people said yes, thankfully. And then I don't know if you can see it, but there's like this tiny little sliver of yellow there, and that's like me selling like 100 of these. And basically, what happened is like it's like a snowball that hopefully feeds off on itself. And so like year 2, I made a bit more. Year 3, I made a bit more. I eventually kind of dropped down most of my consulting, and then I eventually quit my job. So obviously this took a long time, but the nice thing was that like I was never stressed out. I was never like there was never any financial pressure on me or anything like that. Um, so those are some options. Now I'm going to jump into this iteration cycle, and I want to kind of just zoom in on what this looks like and the simplification. But basically, you pick an idea, you build it, you sell it, and then you repeat. And like going back to the sort of like anyone can entrepreneur thing, like this, none of this is like fundamentally hard. Like this isn't rocket science. If you can teach yourself how to code, you can teach yourself how to market, you can teach yourself how to validate ideas. So like this is all stuff you can learn, but it involves massive uncertainty. And so like what that means is you want to go through the cycle as much as possible because on any given iteration, like you don't know what the outcome is going to be. So if you spend like your first 2 years building a product and then like come out the other side and realize like, oh, nobody liked that, then like you've spent a lot of time. Whereas like if you can figure that out in 2 weeks or 2 months, then you can like go through that cycle a lot faster. So I kind of like to say like think of yourself as a one person venture capital portfolio. And what I mean by that is like a VC fund will typically like invest in 100 companies, and they will expect like 90 of those companies to completely fail. But like if they find the next Facebook or the next Uber, then like everyone who invests in the fund makes like tons of money. And so like I think you should think of yourself in the same way where you want to take as many shots as you can on goal, hoping that one of those succeeds. And then like obviously you're not going to like be the next Uber, but like you'll start making 100 rand, 1,000 rand, and then eventually slowly you can like direct your energy there and grow it. So just some like examples from the indie hacking world about this. There's this guy Peter Levels who is just like sleeps in baths of money. But he says his hit rate on projects was about 5%, but that was still enough for him to like have this incredible career doing a very similar thing to me. There's this guy Rob Hope who is a South African. He's got this project graveyard on his website where he like talks about all the things he's tried that have failed. Um, Another example from Twitter is this guy Pat Walls, and I stole his format and like published my own version of this. But basically, you can see like I've done a lot of these things, and only a small number of them have actually like sort of like worked out for me. So with that sort of backdrop in mind of like a lot of things are going to fail, you want to go through this fast as possible. I'll kind of like talk a little bit about these different steps and how you can think about them. So starting from like picking an idea, this is a diagram that I borrowed from someone named Rob Walling. But the key here thing is basically like you want to just walk up these steps of difficulty. And so you want to start on step one with like the smallest, easiest possible thing that you can do. So for me, like that's like this, right? Like it's like someone can give me like 100 rand to like buy a PDF file. That's a very easy thing to build. That's a very easy thing to sell. Once you do that, then you try to do it again, and eventually, hopefully, if you are successful, then you kind of like own your own time. And then like step 3 is like kind of like go do a big ambitious thing. I kind of drew a dotted line there because you don't have to go to step 3. Like you can kind of just have like a bunch of step 2 projects and sort of be having a nice life as a developer with a lot of freedom. So, go take a moonshot if you want, but like, or you can just kind of like, do stuff in here. And I recommend that too. I'm kind of in there. So. But yeah, so start small is the key in terms of like thinking about ideas. So like your ideal first project, it should be easy to build, it should be easy to support, easy to sell, and like it's good if it's not a unicorn idea. Like don't try to build the next Facebook or Uber or OpenAI or whatever else. Like you want to find like a really really specific niche, like and go in there. Okay, so how do you come up with ideas? And there's like lots of stuff you can read on the internet about this and by people who know and see a lot more than me. So I'm not going to say too much about this other than just like go do something. Like the best way to get ideas is to do something. And so like using an example from my own life. So like I got married. We had this issue where like we had to print these stupid place cards. That led to me building this place card application. And that was like my first thing. And then I was like building these applications and I was like, oh, that's another problem. So then I built SaaS Pegasus. And then I had this like SaaS Pegasus community that I was trying to support. And I kept answering the same questions over and over again. I was like, oh, I'll build a RAG chatbot. And so like just through building something, I like found a new problem and then I could go build something else. And like, so don't do something just because like the first thing you're going to pick is going to work, but like do something because like by doing something, you'll just get exposed to more stuff, and then that will lead you somewhere interesting. Just keep following interesting problems until you find one that you want to solve. Yeah, so that. Just want to quickly just kind of mention this book, The Mom Test, which is a great book about validation. The key point from this book is like when you're trying to pitch a startup idea to anybody, like they're going to talk to you like your mom would talk to you. And so you're going to like pitch your thing and they're like, oh, sweetie, that's such a good idea. I love it. You're going to be so successful. And like people do this because they don't want to like burst your bubble. Like you're coming to your friends, you're like coming to your coworkers, be like, I got this cool idea for an app. No one's gonna really like tell you how they actually feel because they want you to like not have your confidence destroyed. So this is a really good book that sort of like hammers that home for you and then gives you a framework for trying to get around the fact that everybody's kind of lying to you when you pitch them. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about building and specifically building an MVP. An MVP is a minimum viable product. Probably a lot of you have heard this. And basically it's like you're trying to build the smallest useful version of your thing. And so like in this example, like a skateboard is useful. Like you can ride a skateboard and get from point A to point B. Whereas like if you have a wheel of a car or like an axle of a car, like that's not useful. There's also a concept called an SLC, which stands for simple, lovable, and complete, which I really like. And you can go read more about that there. Okay, so why do indie products fail? And the main thing that like I want to kind of emphasize here is like indie products are different from like most big company software that probably a lot of you have worked on. And so like in sort of like traditional like day job at Take-A-Lot or something like that, you're probably like dealing with legacy code and maybe like the person who wrote it left and there's no documentation and there's all these scaling issues, performance issues. And like none of this matters in the indie world. Like if you're building an independent project, the reason that you're going to fail is like no one wanted what you were building, you didn't market it, or you ran out of time, money, and motivation. And so like the takeaway for this is just like when in doubt, like optimize everything for speed. Because that optimizes for how fast you can get to market, how fast you can respond to feedback, how fast you can pivot, and how fast you realize like your idea was really dumb and you should go do something else. And no, I'm not saying like write a bunch of terrible code. I'm just saying like be smart about it. And so like, taking something like tests, like you shouldn't like care about code coverage or anything like that. What you should care about is like, if I write this test, am I going to be able to modify this code more confidently faster later? If so, do it. If not, like maybe don't worry about it right now. And I'm not going to read through this whole slide, but like the key thing I want to emphasize is just like don't overthink it. Yeah, in terms of design, I think design is often like sort of the weakest spot for Python developers, and it certainly was for me. Thankfully, you don't really have to be a designer to make good-looking things anymore. Like they're just like there's all these different open source and paid templates where you can just like get these really beautiful designs that work on like all screen sizes, and like they have component libraries, just drop everything in. So you really don't have to do any design. You can just like steal other people's design. And I recommend doing that again, just because it's faster and then you can make it beautiful later. Also, you don't have to start from zero. And this is like a little bit of like a shameless plug, but it's also the case that like I've seen a lot of people succeed because they have used products like mine. But there are these sort of like, it's a whole product category with both open source, free, and paid things. But you can start from these projects that often have like a ton of stuff built for you. And then like, instead of like your first 2 weeks just being like, okay, I'm going to build user accounts and I'm going to build billing and I'm going to build, multi-tenancy and all this stuff, then you just like have all that ready to go. And then you just like focus on the one thing that you need to do. Okay, so fun question. What tech stack should you use? There is a right answer to this, I think. Anyone want to guess what it is? It's not on my t-shirt. The one you know. So again, like if you want to learn a new tech stack as like a fun educational project, that's great. Like if your goal is to sort of get to this revenue generating, product in the world, again, you want to be working in something you're familiar with because you want to be as fast as possible. You're going to be as fast as possible in the tech stack that you know. If you don't know anything, just pick something popular. Popular things have the best communities, best documentation, the language models that are the best at working in them. And so, yeah, I use Django, HTMX, and Tailwind for most of my stuff. I like it, but you should do what you know. And finally, remember, if you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. That's a quote from founder of LinkedIn. And like this was the landing page for PlaceCard.me that like I used for the first, I don't know, year or something like that. Like those are literally like font awesome icons and just like this giant stupid button. But like I, you have to get comfortable putting things out into the world that don't meet your level of internal quality, because like you just have to try it, and the feedback, starting the feedback loop is much more important than like building a perfect thing. Okay, so moving on to selling, I think one of the biggest fallacies that I see in developers is just this idea that like if they build the best product in the world, that they're going to be successful. And they think like, the reason that Jira, I mean, Jira is probably a terrible example, but the reason that some software is successful is because it was the best product, when usually it is because that product had the best marketing team or some combination of a great product and a great marketing. So yeah, I think an uncomfortable truth is that you will need to spend a lot of time sort of just like selling your product through something like marketing or sales. There's this book Traction that I recommend, and this book is where I got the takeaway that I should be spending half of my time on marketing and sales. I think of it like eating my vegetables. Like I love coding, I hate marketing. So it's like, I have to like do marketing today, and then it's like, okay, I'm going to eat my vegetables, and then like I can have my cake or my chips or whatever it is. But yeah, I recommend doing this. I also recommend like selling your product before it's ready. I'm sure we've all had this experience where you like find some app that looks really cool and you're like, cool, I want to sign up for this. And then you just get this pop-up that's like, can we have your email address, please? And as a consumer, that's super frustrating. But as an app builder, this is really useful because for two reasons. One reason is that if you can't get someone to give you their email address, then it's going to be very hard to get them to like pay you. So it's a good proxy for like, am I building something that anyone is even remotely interested in? And so like you put this up, you figure out a way to drive traffic to it, you get a bunch of emails, that's a good sign. If you drive like 1,000 people to this website and you don't get any emails, that's probably a bad sign. So it's a good way to get an early signal of something. It's also really important to have people to tell about your product when it's actually ready. So like what often happens is someone will, build in the darkness for a long time. They'll launch their product, they'll like put it on Hacker News or something. Nobody notices. And then they like think that they failed when in fact like, hey, they haven't marketed it more. But also like if they had had a list of 200 people that they knew were interested in their product, then like before you launch, you can email 20 of them. And you can be like, hey, can we set up like a Zoom? And like, I just want to like walk you through this and like get some feedback. You can iterate there. You like email the next 20. And then when you actually launch, you email the whole list. Hopefully you have people like jumping into your product from day one. So it is really useful to sort of do this, even though it's super annoying when it happens to you. Getting your first traction. These are just some strategies that worked for me. Communities are a really good place to like find early users. The great thing about communities is they're like incredibly niche. So like if you're building a product for like plumbers who play Dungeons and Dragons, like there's probably like a Reddit for that. There's probably like 20 Facebook groups for that. And like you can go immediately into those communities and talk to like your ideal customer profile. One thing I'll say about communities is like all marketers also do that. And so all the communities hate them. They develop these like pretty big immune systems towards people doing marketing stuff. So just like go into communities, but also like do it tactfully and sort of like be nice in the community and add value and stuff. But this is a great way to find early users. Ads are a really good way to find early users. Like obviously like Google sponsored links are just like very prominent. You can use ads on all these other platforms, but ads are great, again, to try to answer that question of like, does anybody want what I'm building, or like, can anyone figure out how to use my product? You can sort of just pay a bit of money for like, 100 people to come play with your website and sort of figure out what's happening on there. So I don't recommend using ads as a way to like make money. Like you will lose money on this exercise, but you're trading sort of like early bits of money to like do some user research essentially, and it's a good strategy for that. Cold outreach is another uncomfortable one that also works sometimes. What I would say about cold outreach is like so when I was building PlaceCard.me, I was like I basically spent an hour a day just like reading wedding blogs and writing long personal emails to wedding bloggers, and like I would just do this every day, and most of them never responded to me, obviously. But one of them did, and then like this person like helped me a ton in terms of like just like teaching me about the industry. Like she gave me backlinks to the site. She like gave me some designs to put on the site. And so this can be a good strategy, but do it again. I would say do it like it's better to write one really, really good email or Twitter DM or whatever it is than to like find some tool that uses an LLM to like write 100 and like they're all terrible. And then finally, like content. So content is my main way that I market my stuff today. And basically, the way you do this is like if you're building a product for whatever industry. So like I target Django developers, so I write just like content about Django. And then people, someone's Googling like, okay, how do I deploy Django or how do I like connect Django to Stripe? And then they like find my guide, and that is sort of like a nice way to get exposure to like, oh, this product exists, and you get backlinks and so on. I do some of the stuff on YouTube now also. Videos a little more. YouTube is huge. So I don't have really like any YouTube following, but like it still drives a good amount of traffic. But this is again, like it's something that you can do as an individual, just sort of like writing these blog posts or recording little screencasts and stuff. I hesitated to put this slide on, but this was something that I did a lot, which is called building in public, and that's just kind of where you just like share what you're working on. So I did this on my blog. You'll see this like on Twitter all the time. It's gotten to be a very like sort of noisy channel. But the nice thing about this strategy is it requires almost no work. So basically you just like, you work on your project for like 2 hours and then you just like post a screenshot of what you did. And like maybe a few people will like find what you're doing interesting, follow along your journey, and then they become just like little advocates that will like, maybe like use your stuff, maybe connect you to other people and so on. Okay, almost done. So I want to talk a little bit about psychology. And so I lied with this diagram. This is not the only thing that happens. Um, there's another path, which is not as good, which is giving up. Cortland Allen, who is the founder of Indie Hackers, so he like interviewed, hundreds and hundreds of people who have gone down this path. And, he was asked, what's your biggest takeaway from all this? And he was like, all you have to do is just not quit. Like just don't quit. And then like there's nothing else. There's no other generalizable advice he had. It was just like, don't quit. So how do you prevent yourself from quitting? One is by having infinite runway. So I kind of talked about this already, but setting this up in a way so that like at least money is not the reason that you quit is a good way to at least like eliminate that particular constraint. You still might run out of motivation. And so in order to stay motivated, I think one of the best or most important things to do is to just manage your own expectations. So I like this quote from Bill Gates, which is that most people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. I found this really resonated with me. And if you think like, okay, I'm going to like go down this path and I'm going to take a shot and I'm going to spend 3 months and I'm going to launch my app and then it's like, it didn't work, I'm going to quit. And like, I think that is something that happens to a lot of people. And if you think of it as more of like a 5-year journey or a 10-year journey, like I want to get to this point 10 years from now. So I'm just going to like take these really small steps that don't really look like they're working, but they're cumulative and eventually they add up. Embracing learning is useful. I think this is kind of like a D&D like skill chart of like probably the average person in this room is like a pretty good coder, maybe knows a bit about like product and marketing, these other skills. But like in order to really succeed in this career, you have to kind of look more like this. And the hard part is really just like embracing the idea that you're going to learn these skills that don't feel comfortable. So like I've never enjoyed marketing. I've never like wanted to be a marketer, but like it's just like it was like a thing that I had to learn in order to like sell stuff. So if you're not willing to sort of get outside your comfort zone and learn things that are sort of like outside what feels comfortable in your current situation, then you will probably have trouble. And finally, be resilient. This is a funny graph. So this is how much money I was making every week on PlaceCardMe in 2020, and like things were going great. I was like making like whatever, going up to like $400 a week, and then all of a sudden there was a global pandemic, and people weren't really having weddings anymore, and my like primary source of passive income just like dropped to zero overnight. That one example of just like things that happen to you because this is like a very unpredictable career. But there's like the highs are really high, the lows are also really low, and you have to sort of like be resilient to a lot of these like ups and downs. And like, okay, I'm going to go like 2 weeks without earning any money, and then like one day, like a bunch of money's just going to appear in my bank account. Like it's a very like stressful thing, and you have to just kind of like get used to these sort of big swings that you just don't have in a salary job. But if you emerge on the other side, then hopefully you can profit. This is like from my very first blog post when I first started. I was like, I just want to like get someone to pay me like $1 on the internet. Like that was my goal. I want someone to pay me $1 on the internet. And like 8, 9 years later, like I am making more money than I ever made as like CTO of my company. But more importantly, like it's a very like nice lifestyle. Like I have time to hang out with my kids whenever I want. I can go on long vacations. Nobody tells me what to do. I can take meetings like whenever I feel like it or never. So yeah, I recommend it. I recommend you give it a shot. And I will take any questions if we have time. I know we're late. And that's my website, my socials.
Okay, thank you very much. We do have some time for questions. I just ask, please raise your hand and wait for a microphone to arrive before asking your question. So, who wants to start?
So, Cory, do you find that the South African attitudes about this is a lot different to, say, attitudes in the US in terms of willingness to spend money on software, in terms of seeing these possibilities?
Yes, I think so. I think so. And one thing that so I'm obviously American, so I have this kind of complicated perspective, living here for 9 years, but also still like earning dollars. So like one thing I can't untangle is whether it's a constraints problem or whether it's like a psychological problem. Like I know the job market for developers here is just like they don't pay as well as they do internationally. Um, One thing that I see local developers do a lot, which I sort of don't recommend, is they like often focus on local markets. And like I had a slide in here, but I don't know if you've seen that cartoon where it's like on the internet nobody knows you're a dog. Like so I had like on the internet nobody knows you're South African. And like the point is like you don't have to just sell to like the local South African market, which is quite small. Like you can sell to Americans, you can sell to Europeans, like, and so if you can build a product that targets like a much bigger audience, I think that's a very useful thing to do. And like most of the people doing this, like they're all just like American and European digital nomads who are like living in Bali and like, but yeah, I mean, I do think South Africans that I have seen maybe are a little bit less sort of gung ho about it, or a little bit less confident in terms of trying to take the step. But hard to say. I do know like a ton. There's an indie hackers meetup in Cape Town, and I mentioned Wasani and Rob, but there are a bunch of indie hackers in Cape Town who are doing this stuff. But yeah, it's not as common, I would say.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks a lot, Cory. That
Oh,
was
you fill in
really
the
cool.
blank.
So, something that I take away from your talk, you know, and I think you almost sort of bury the lead a bit, in that you're talking always about making money and earning stuff, but
Sorry.
um,
I'm listening.
the thing that I think is, which really stands out to me is, how much agency you have and how much control you have over your life and the pattern of your life, and you're being quite deliberate about the choices you're making. And I was just wondering if you don't mind reflecting a little bit about that, and sort of what is it, there are all these pressures to, buy into all these other things, and you're very much following your own path. So yeah, it's not really a clear question, but see what you
Yeah.
can make of it.
Well, that was the whole point. And I should say, like those graphs I showed with like the money breakdowns, like those were intentionally percentages because the money went down a lot. and basically like for many years I traded that money for essentially what you're talking about, the freedom, the agency, the ability to just like solve interesting problems and code on cool projects instead of managing and doing sprints or whatever the thing is. So I did focus on the money because it's necessary. Obviously, like we all have to pay rent and buy food and stuff like that. But yeah, the money isn't the point at all. I do think it's not a career you should pursue if your goal is money. It is a career you should pursue if your goal is agency or freedom or flexibility or some of these other priorities. So I totally agree with you on that.
You've spoken about this as very much a solo thing. Is it something that could work with like a partnership? My wife is much more interested in marketing stuff than I am.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I would if if there was like a great marketer that wanted to partner with me, that would be great. I would love to never do it again. So yeah, no, it can. I mean, it's just and a lot of there are a lot of like indie products that have sort of like a technical founder and a marketer founder or some kind of split like that. Obviously, with two people, it's two salaries potentially. Although if it's your wife, then maybe you can sort that out. So yeah, no, definitely no constraints around people. What I would caution against is sort of like working with strangers, because another benefit and downside of this is like I can choose exactly who I work with, and like I couldn't at my other job, and I got very frustrated with certain people, and so like pick carefully people that you get along with really well and that are sort of like high performing, people that you want to partner with essentially, which hopefully if you were willing to marry her, then you like her.
Thank you so much for your talk. It was really excellent. As someone who works at home and by myself, I actually have a partner who's based in Berlin. It's a very similar kind of story, and changing from a salary to something that pays you your own money is fucking frightening, but it's really rewarding at the end. What I wanted to ask you was, how do you stay sane? You don't have colleagues that you can have a chat with over coffee, or what do you do to meet people or get ideas or get inspiration or bounce ideas or things like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's probably the biggest downside as well, I would say. Like I really do miss sort of the organic uh, knowledge sharing and idea collaboration and cross pollination, everything that comes from going to an office, collaborating with people every day. Um, let's see. So I have two answers. One is that I don't love that I'm going to say this, but like online, like there are sort of like these online communities of people. And specifically, like the nice thing about online is you can kind of find people who are at the same stage as you at any stage. And so like it's not necessarily like a getting started problem, but like as I've kind of faced bigger and harder challenges with this career, I've sort of met more people on Twitter or X or you know social medias and developed relationships with them. There are places in South Africa and in Cape Town. So there is I mentioned the Indie Hackers Meetup, which is quite cool. That happens every month in Cape Town. I think it's on like the third Thursday of the month, and you can meet some cool people there. And then I don't know, like conferences. Obviously, I think we all appreciate the value of conferences here. You can meet people, and the short answer is like I'm kind of alone a lot, and maybe not very socially adjusted anymore. I don't know. Never kind of came out of my COVID hole.
I will notice, are you sane is somewhat a loaded question, but I'm assuming the answer is yes.
It was a supposition.
Thank you for your talk. I would like to know if you could do this over, what would you do differently and why?
I don't have a good answer to that. I think you can't, it's kind of like a stupid truism, but like you can't like learn something without going through it in a way. Like I think you can like you could read a lot of books about like this talk. Like this talk maybe like gave you some information, but like nothing you learned in here, if you learned anything in here, is like going to help you until you actually like go try and do something, and then you're going to run into your problems, and then probably you're going to like a year in realize like, oh, I should have built my email list before I launched, and like, but then you'll know, right? And I think I don't think there wasn't any obvious way that I could have done what I did and gotten to where I did faster, because like I said, like every failed trip through the cycle is a lesson, is a skill, is something that you've learned and gone through. Sorry about the non-answer.
Hi. Obviously, you've done multiple apps or multiple projects. Which group of people do you find easier to work with when it comes to the product which you're doing? Obviously, you are targeting a specific group of people.
Yeah, not people who are planning their weddings and stressed out. No, I mean, I had a slide about this, but like I think one of the important questions. So I think if you're just getting started, just like try to make your first dollar, because that is just like it's like steroids. It's like a steroid boost of motivation to just like get you going. My nuanced answer to like how to choose a product later is to search for like product founder fit, and that goes to what you're talking about, which is essentially like you want to be building a product for people that you like, that you want to work with, that you know how to talk to, that you know how to sell to. So like, when I was like doing SEO for PlaceCard.me, I was like writing these blog posts about like, here's 25 different ways you can build a place card stand. And it's like, and I would be sitting there writing this, and I just wanted to like shoot myself in the head. Like, it's just terrible. Whereas like now I can like, I can like come to PyCon and I can like meet with all you people, because like I'm building a product primarily for Django developers, and I can mostly just like talk about stuff that I'm interested in. And so, yeah, I think it matters a lot, and you want to choose the types of people that you like, basically. And so for me, that was like, that's developers, that's entrepreneurs. It's just, I mean, it's often people like yourself, I suppose. So, so I now build products mostly for people like me.
Hi, thanks for the talk. You talk about this sort of infinite runway idea where you keep working at a salaried job, maybe 4 days a week. How common is it for those employers to actually allow their employees to go and build these things on the side and not try and claim ownership over what they're building?
Yeah, it's a complicated answer. If you're a high performer, I think you have much more bargaining power than you know. And so like, as like someone who was like in management as a company, like if our best developer or best product person came to us and was like, look, like I want to go do this thing, and like, here are your options. Like, either I'm going to take every Friday off and I'm going to like try and do this thing on the side, or I'm going to quit. Like, we would be like, oh, really? But then we would let them do it, because like if you're a high performer, then the organization really wants to keep you. Like, training people takes a lot of time and money. Hiring people takes a lot of time and money. And so like, if you are in an organization where they value you a lot, I think you have a much stronger negotiating position than you might realize. This might not apply to like really big companies. So I think if you're working for like a Take-A-Lot or an Amazon or something like that, they're probably like, the policy is the policy is the policy. And but if you're working for sort of like, like I won't try to get Marco's employees to start quitting. But if you're working for a smaller company, then you might have more flexibility in management and more of a possibility of making that ask. I do think you have more negotiating power than you realize if you are like a valued team member at an organization, and probably like a lot of people undervalue themselves by not realizing that. It's very easy to get caught up in like, oh, I just like, my job is to like make the company happy, but there's obviously more to life than that.
Yes. Thank you again.